Robin Hood is one of the most memorable folktales from ye olde medieval times. The story's been told and retold so many times we've lost count. Robin Hood 2018 will also be a new retelling, but in what way? That's exactly what we're going to try and answer today. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to CBR and ring that little bell to join our notification squad so you never miss a video. Without further ado, here's what we know about the latest Robin Hood movie.
What else you got?
Robin Hood Through the Ages. The gist of the Robin Hood tale as we know it goes like this. The King of England has gone on crusade. While he's gone, his corrupt officials begin mistreating the peasants by raising their taxes and stealing their stuff. A heroic outlaw named Robin Hood, who lives in the woods with his band of merry men, steps up to fight those corrupt officials before the king can return and set things right for good. You might not know that the first reference to Robin Hood doesn't even mention the Sheriff of Nottingham, or Little Prince John, or any robbing from the rich to give to the poor. We first learn of Robin Goodfellow in the early 16th century poem The Guest of Robin Hood. Yes, there's a sheriff who holds an archery tournament and tries to arrest Robin and company for winning. Otherwise, it's mostly about this other knight dude who owes Robin interest on a loan. The knight has to jump through a bunch of complicated hoops to repay our hooded hero. In that legend, Robin is a yeoman. That was a class of rich guy in medieval England. His followers bow to him like a noble. He's kind to the peasants, but he isn't one of them. It's about a century later that we start to hear about him robbing from the rich to give to the poor, and since then, people have reinterpreted Robin Hood to fit their own purposes.
Why, that's curious. I've often heard that you'd give me a warm welcome if ever we met again.
In the 1800s, Robin Hood was depicted as a patriotic Anglo-Saxon fighting the oppression of the French-speaking Norman invaders. In the 1991 Kevin Costner film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, an Arab character named Azim is added to the band of merry men. The 1984 TV miniseries added a similar character named Nasir. The 2006 BBC series includes Saracen character named Jack, that's spelled D-J-A-Q, who turns out to be a woman disguised as a boy enslaved during the Crusades. All of this is probably a way of acknowledging that the Crusades weren't one of Europe's finest moments. It looks like the current film will be following suit, as it appears the film could actually be set in the middle of the Crusades. The setting of the trailer is a pretty giant city for poor, backward medieval Europe. Most cities of that size at the time were somewhere in the Middle East. The point is, each generation find its own use for Robin Hood, so how will the 2018 Robin Hood film suit the needs and beliefs of audiences in 2018? We'll just have to watch the film and find out. But we do see a giant city rising up against the corrupt influences of the sheriff. It looks like a more urban tale than previous iterations that take place in Sherwood Forest. More people live in cities than ever before today. Issues surrounding inequalities of wealth occupy a lot of our political discourse. Maybe the 2018 film is trying to piggyback on these trends. Like so many old myths, Robin Hood is never really about the man in the green hat. It's about us.
This is suicide.
Can't you see what you're doing?
It might be great, or it could be bad, like really, really bad. We won't lie that some reactions to the Robin Hood 2018 trailer have been less than kind. Most of the complaints on the interwebs center around the visual tone of the movie and its departure from historical accuracy. First of all, many have noted that the trailer makes the film look suspiciously like an Assassin's Creed movie. That movie was a big disappointment for most fans of the game, let alone for most moviegoers. A 19% score on Rotten Tomatoes ain't no fluke. More generally, the 2018 Robin Hood's visual tone seems a little confusing. Is this really set in medieval times if the Sheriff of Nottingham, played by Ben Mendelsohn, has a space-age overcoat? He looks like some admiral in Star Trek. When is this exactly supposed to take place? Everything has a very modern flair despite the lack of electricity and plumbing. What remains to be seen is if the filmmakers can make that work or not. Also, nobody wore biker leather in medieval times. Yeah, it looks cool, but still. Also, with no gunpowder yet, there weren't many giant explosions. Let's also talk about Robin Hood's signature weapon, the bow and arrow. Marvel and Star Wars dominate the box office. It's no surprise that audiences expect a little bit more action than could be delivered by the real thing, but in the trailer we see Robin Hood learning to use fire arrows and crossbow bolts like they're automatic weapons from our century. That could either be awesome or cheesy, but it's hard to tell how we'll feel about it based on just the trailer. What's gonna ultimately matter is whether or not we're given a reason to care about Robin, Little John, and anyone else oppressed by the Sheriff of Nottingham. It could take place in the Middle East. One of the things that's clear from the trailer is that the setting of this Robin Hood film will be different from how the legend has played out on screen in the past. That's because it's a very urban-centric film. Most of the time it seems to take place in some giant city. Now, one thing we know about medieval England is that the cities weren't that huge. Sure, London wasn't small, but in the year 1100 it had about 18,000 residents. The city in the trailer looks a lot bigger than that. It's also built into steep, rocky hills. Something like that doesn't really fit the bill for a lot of English cities at that time. The city in the trailer has narrow streets with tan-colored buildings made of stone. Medieval Europe was basically made out of wood, if you don't count the castles and churches, of course. But there were a lot of cities like that in the Middle East during the medieval period. Cities like Jerusalem, Antioch, or Beirut. All three of those cities were captured and recaptured by the Crusaders between the 11th and 14th centuries. All three still have tan buildings made of stone. All three are situated near steep hills or mountains. Beirut and Antioch are flanked by the mountains and the sea. It's also notable that Richard the Lionhearted, the king in most Robin Hood retellings, went on the Third Crusade and did a lot of conquering himself. So does this new Robin Hood film take place on a crusade? And if Robin Hood is freeing the citizens of that city from the Sheriff of Nottingham, does that mean he also helped the Crusaders conquer the city in the first place? Maybe he has a change of heart. That's a possibility for sure. The other possibility is that the filmmakers took creative licenses with what England looked like in the Middle Ages. We'll only know for sure when we finally watch the movie in late 2018.
This is our shot.
Maid Marian is already married. Throughout the ages, Robin Hood's main love interest has been Maid Marian. In most legends and plays, Marian is Robin's wife. Lots of the early ballads depict Marian as a noblewoman with a boyish streak. She disguises herself as male characters while escaping to the forest to live with Robin. In some later versions of the tale, Robin has to rescue Marian from any number of bad guys. This can include our old friend the sheriff, or some evil nobles in league with King John. The tale usually ends with Robin marrying Marian, if they weren't married already. But it's only in the 2018 film that Marian will already be married to another character, Will Scarlet. In the original stories, Scarlet is actually one of Robin Hood's merry men, and his half-brother. So what'll happen in this movie? Well, supposedly Marian will actually be married to Will Scarlet, but will also be Robin's love interest. The question is, will Scarlet die first before Marian and Robin can hit it off? The other possibility is that we'll get a tension-fueled love triangle for the sheriff and his sinister henchmen to exploit. Maybe Scarlet temporarily switches sides once he knows that his wife is interested in Robin. The third possibility is that Robin just won't get the girl. Scarlet could be kind of like Han Solo, who, surprise, gets with Princess Leia. Maybe Robin, like Luke Skywalker, takes one for the team by becoming a celibate monk like Friar Tuck. There's no reason why that wouldn't work, and honestly, seeing the hero get the girl without any surprises or twists got boring a long time ago.
Okay.
Produced by Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo DiCaprio is every 90s girl's dreamboat. Well, at least that was before he passed the torch to Johnny Depp in Orlando Bloom. Since then, he's been the star of a lot of great films. But you might not know that he owns his own production company called Appian Way that's producing 2018's Robin Hood movie. Appian Way has produced a string of psychological horrors and prestige films. That includes 3 solid Martin Scorsese projects like Shutter Island, The Aviator, and Wolf of Wall Street. 3 great films with 3 great Leo performances. But looking at their film titles, only one seems even vaguely related to Robin Hood. That's 2011's Red Riding Hood, and tellingly, it's a gritting reboot of a fairy tale that didn't do so well when it came out. The early 2010s were a sort of transition period. Marvel had just been bought by Disney, but the MCU was only just taking off. The Harry Potter films were winding down, Lord of the Rings was over, and the release of the first Hobbit was just gearing up. So was the news that Disney would purchase Star Wars. And at the time, there were a bunch of gritty reboots of fairy tales. Red Riding Hood was one, and so was 2012's Snow White and the Huntsman. Neither did very well, so the question is, why is Appian Way taking on Robin Hood, a similar type of project, when a new set of major franchises already dominates the box office all these years later? For all we know, there could be reams of data telling them this film will do well. Statistics and focus groups indicating that 2018 really is the year for Robin Hood. DC's Arrow, for instance, has had solid ratings for 6 seasons and did really well for the CW. And we know film studios have tons of micro-targeting strategies to get audiences into the theaters. Maybe they have an ironclad strategy to fill those seats. They're definitely not releasing it in a dump month like January or August, which is when films that studios think won't do well get, dumped. Instead, they've picked November, which means they're confident. Leonardo DiCaprio clearly thinks we need Robin to emerge from that forest once again. We're just gonna have to wait and see if he's right.
Look what I found in my pocket! Look! A year's salary right here!
And that's all that we have on Robin Hood 2018. What do you think of the trailer? Do you like the new take on Robin Hood? Let us know in the comments section below, and please don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching.